If you've ever wondered what true courage looked like in the Wild West, stick around. Today's tale will leave you thinking. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button, tap the bell so you don't miss the next Wild West story, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if you saw a man strike a woman in broad daylight? The town of Red Rock baked under the last light of a setting sun, its wooden storefronts and dusty main street glowing like copper. People moved slow at this hour, women carrying baskets, cowhands leaning against rail posts, merchants sweeping their stoops. The air carried the scent of horse sweat and tobacco, the quiet hum of a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Samuel Briggs guided his horse into town, the leather reins worn smooth by his hands. A tall man with broad shoulders and a weathered face, he was known more for silence than for speech. Folks said the rancher lived too long without company, that he had buried his words along with his family out in the hills. He came to Red Rock rarely, and when he did, he never lingered. Today was meant to be no different, just a sack of flour, a tin of coffee, and the ride back home. But fate often waits in plain sight. A burst of laughter spilled from the saloon doors, followed by the sharp crack of a man's voice. Samuel slowed his horse, his gray eyes narrowing as he saw Clyde Tanner step into the street. Clyde was a gambler, broad-chested and slick with arrogance, the sort who wore his cruelty like a badge. He had one hand clamped around a young woman's arm. Eliza May. She was new in town, a seamstress trying to make an honest living. Her bonnet had slipped sideways, and her cheeks burned with shame as Clyde towered over her. "You don't tell me no, girl," Clyde snarled. "Not in this town." Before anyone could draw breath, his fist snapped forward and struck her across the face. The sound was sickening, raw, a blow that turned every head in the street. Eliza stumbled, nearly falling, her hand clutching her cheek. The townsfolk froze. A storekeeper shifted uneasily, but did nothing. A cowboy cursed under his breath and looked away. The sheriff, nowhere to be seen, might as well have been a ghost. Fear ran thicker than courage in Red Rock when Clyde Tanner was involved. Samuel slid from his saddle without hurry, his boots thudding against the packed dirt. For a heartbeat, the town seemed to hold its breath. The reclusive rancher wasn't known to meddle in others' affairs. Many thought he had no fight left in him. Yet he walked forward, steady as the horizon. Eliza's eyes flicked up, wide and uncertain. Samuel reached her, and in a gesture that startled every soul watching, he extended his hand. Not to strike, not to drag her away, but to offer her his palm, broad, calloused, gentle. She hesitated, trembling, and the moment stretched thin. Then, slowly, her hand settled into his. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A murmur rose, the kind of sound that speaks louder than shouting. No one had ever defied Clyde with kindness before. No one had dared to stand without steel drawn. Clyde's lips twisted into a snarl. "You got business here, Briggs? Or you forget how to mind your own?" Samuel didn't answer. His thumb brushed lightly over Eliza's knuckles, a silent promise she wasn't alone. He looked Clyde in the eye, a calm fire burning behind the quiet. The message was clear without words: the cruelty stops here. Eliza tried to pull away, half in fear of what might follow, but Samuel's grip, firm yet tender, anchored her. He was not a man of speeches, yet in that moment, his silence said everything. He wasn't playing hero. He wasn't seeking glory. He simply could not watch and do nothing. The crowd shifted restlessly. Some braced for gunfire. Others exchanged uneasy glances, as though seeing Samuel for the first time. The lonely rancher, the man they thought hollowed by grief, had stepped into the light with nothing more than the strength of his hand. Clyde spat into the dirt, his pride stung raw before the eyes of the town. He shoved forward, his bulk towering over Samuel, daring him to flinch. But Samuel stood like a post rooted deep in the earth, unshaken. The silence stretched, heavy as storm clouds before the break. Eliza's breath hitched, the bruise already rising on her cheek. Samuel's grip did not falter. And though nothing more was spoken, everyone watching understood, the night was not finished. Something was coming, and the line had just been drawn. Would Samuel pay for it with his blood? Or would Clyde discover that cruelty was no match for quiet defiance? The sun sank lower, the sky bleeding red, as the town of Red Rock waited for the storm to break. The crowd that had gathered in Red Rock Street was silent, caught between fear of Clyde Tanner and awe of Samuel Briggs. The gambler's jaw clenched as he looked from Samuel's steady hand holding Eliza's to the faces of the townsfolk, every eye fixed on the spectacle. He had built his power on their silence, their willingness to look away. But tonight, silence had been broken by something he couldn't understand, a quiet man's defiance expressed in the simple act of holding a woman's hand. "You think you can shame me, Briggs?" Clyde growled, his voice low, dangerous. "You want to make me small in front of these people? Then stand up and take what's coming." Samuel's gaze didn't waver. He released Eliza's hand only to step forward, planting himself firmly between her and Clyde. The rancher's shoulders squared, his body weathered by years of work, not fights, but there was a calm strength in him that made Clyde falter for the briefest second. The gambler sneered, pushing past his hesitation. He swung, a heavy fist meant to put Samuel in the dirt. The punch landed hard against Samuel's jaw, and the rancher staggered but didn't fall. Gasps rose from the crowd. For the first time in years, the people of Red Rock saw Samuel bleed. He straightened slowly, spit copper into the dust, and then lifted his eyes, calm and relentless. That look struck harder than any fist. Clyde swung again, faster, but Samuel caught his arm. The rancher's grip was iron, his hand honed by endless days wrangling cattle and hauling fence posts. He twisted, sending Clyde reeling back. The crowd shuffled, forming a ring without a word, as though compelled to witness. The fight exploded. Clyde threw wild blows, rage fueling every strike. Samuel countered with grim efficiency, each move measured, born not of training but of a life that demanded endurance. Clyde's fists cracked against his ribs, his cheek, yet Samuel stayed upright, his body refusing to yield. With every exchange, his silence grew louder, until the people began to murmur. He was taking the punishment, not just for Eliza, but for all of them who had bent beneath Clyde's cruelty. Sweat poured down Clyde's brow, his chest heaving. His strike slowed, his arrogance unraveling. Samuel seized the moment. One heavy punch to Clyde's gut bent him double. Another to his jaw sent him sprawling into the dirt. The gambler rolled, groaning, his pride shattered before the eyes of those who once feared him. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Dust hung in the air like smoke after battle. Then, footsteps approached. Sheriff Dugan, old and usually reluctant, had finally appeared, spurred on by what he had seen. He bent, slapped irons on Clyde's wrists, and hauled him up. "You've gone too far this time, Tanner," the sheriff muttered, more to himself than to the prisoner. But the crowd heard, and they knew the tide had shifted. Samuel wiped blood from his lip, his chest rising steady despite the bruises. Eliza stood just beyond, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, relief, and something softer that had no name yet. When Samuel looked at her, she didn't turn away. He stepped toward her, his hand once more extended, palm open and patient. This time, she did not hesitate. Her fingers slid into his, and the gesture no longer carried the weight of defiance but of choice. The crowd's whispers swelled into something like approval, a release of years of silence. People nodded, some even smiling, as though seeing a future they had not dared to hope for. Clyde cursed, thrashing against the sheriff's grip, but no one listened. The gambler's voice, once so loud, had been drowned out by something stronger. Samuel had not drawn a gun. He had not shouted. He had endured, he had stood, and he had reached for kindness in a place where cruelty had ruled. Eliza squeezed his hand, her bruised cheek trembling as tears threatened to fall. Samuel's rough voice finally broke the silence he had carried for years. "You're safe now," he said, the words simple but carrying more weight than any speech could. The people of Red Rock, hardened by years of compromise, looked at the pair standing together in the center of their town. They saw more than a fight. They saw a turning point, a reminder that even in the harsh land of the frontier, decency could rise like dawn over the dust. The night closed in, lanterns flickering to life along the street, but the image remained burned into every memory, the lonely rancher, no longer alone, standing with the woman he had chosen to defend. And in that quiet, the town knew that something had changed forever. The storm had broken. Red Rock would never be the same.